The mystery beneath the soil. In the heart of southeastern Europe, along the banks of the Danube River, archaeologists uncovered a mystery that continues to challenge historians and linguists to this day. Long before the rise of famous ancient writing systems like those of Mesopotamia or Egypt, strange symbols were carved into clay, pottery, and figurines by a prehistoric culture. These markings are now known as the Vinca symbols, and some researchers believe they may represent the oldest writing system ever discovered in Europe. Yet despite decades of research, no one has been able to read them. They remain silent messages from a forgotten world, a puzzle buried in time, the discovery of the Vinca civilization. The story begins in the early 20th century, when archaeologists started excavating sites near the village of Vinca in present-day Serbia. The excavations revealed the remains of a remarkably advanced Neolithic culture that flourished between roughly 5,500 and 4,500 BCE. This culture, now called the Vinca civilization, built large settlements, practiced agriculture, and produced sophisticated pottery and figurines. But among these artifacts, researchers noticed something unusual: carefully carved symbols appearing repeatedly on clay tablets, vessels, and ritual objects. These symbols were not random scratches or decorations. They appeared deliberately placed and often repeated in recognizable patterns. This raised an extraordinary question. Could these marks represent a form of writing created thousands of years before the earliest known scripts? A civilization ahead of its time, the Vinca civilization was one of the most developed societies of Neolithic Europe. Its settlements were large and well organized, sometimes housing several thousand inhabitants. Homes were built in rows, streets were planned, and evidence suggests that the community had specialized craftspeople producing pottery, tools, and ornaments. Archaeologists have also found evidence of early metallurgy, including copper tools and decorative items. This level of technological sophistication suggests a society capable of complex communication and symbolic thinking. The appearance of the mysterious symbols within this cultural context strengthens the possibility that the Vinca people developed a system of symbolic recording, perhaps even writing, the symbols themselves. More than 700 distinct symbols have been identified in artifacts associated with the Vinca culture. Some resemble simple geometric shapes, lines, crosses, triangles, and circles. Others appear more complex, almost like abstract figures or stylized objects. The symbols are typically carved into wet clay before it was fired, suggesting they were intentionally created during the manufacturing process. What makes the symbols particularly intriguing is that they often appear in sequences. Sometimes 2 or 3 symbols appear together. In rare cases, longer combinations have been found. This structured arrangement hints at the possibility that they represent a meaningful system rather than mere decoration. Yet unlike later scripts, the symbols do not form long texts. Most inscriptions are extremely short, leaving researchers with very little context to analyze. The famous Tărtăria tablets. One of the most controversial discoveries connected to the Vinca symbols occurred in 1961 in the village of Tărtăria in modern-day Romania. Archaeologists unearthed 3 small clay tablets bearing strange carved markings. The tablets appeared to contain symbols very similar to those found in Vinca artifacts. If the dating of these tablets is correct, they could be around 7,000 years old, possibly older than the earliest Sumerian writing. This discovery sparked intense debate among scholars. Could these tablets represent the oldest known writing system in the world? Some researchers argue that the tablets prove that writing developed independently in Europe long before the rise of Mesopotamian civilizations. Others remain skeptical, suggesting the symbols might instead be ritual markings or symbolic decorations rather than true writing or symbolic art. The central debate surrounding the Vinca symbols revolves around one crucial question: are they truly writing? For a system to qualify as writing, it usually must represent language in a structured way. Known ancient scripts, such as cuneiform or hieroglyphs, eventually formed long texts capable of recording complex information. The Vinca symbols, however, appear only in short sequences and lack clear grammatical patterns. Some experts believe the symbols functioned more like religious signs, clan markers, or ownership marks. They may have held cultural or spiritual meaning without representing spoken language. Others argue that the limited number of symbols and their repeated use strongly suggest a proto-writing system, an early stage in the development of writing that never fully evolved into a complete script. Why the symbols remain undeciphered. Deciphering an ancient writing system requires certain clues, and unfortunately, the Vinca symbols provide very few. For example, the famous Rosetta Stone allowed scholars to decode Egyptian hieroglyphs because it contained the same text written in multiple languages. Nothing like that exists for the Vinca script. Another problem is the brevity of the inscriptions. Most contain only a few characters, making it extremely difficult to detect patterns or linguistic structures. Without longer texts or bilingual references, researchers have little to work with. Additionally, the language spoken by the Vinca people is completely unknown. Since the culture existed thousands of years before recorded Indo-European languages spread across Europe, the original language may be lost forever. A glimpse into Neolithic thought. Even if the symbols cannot be read, they still offer valuable insight into the minds of the people who created them. The consistent shapes, repeated patterns, and deliberate placement indicate that the Vinca people had a sophisticated symbolic culture. These symbols may have represented religious ideas, social identities, or early attempts to record information. They remind us that prehistoric societies were far more complex than once believed. Far from being primitive villagers, the Vinca people may have been experimenting with ways to record meaning long before writing systems emerged elsewhere. The spread of the symbols. Interestingly, similar symbols had been discovered at multiple archaeological sites across Southeastern Europe, not just at Vinca itself. This suggests that the symbolic system may have spread across a large cultural network. Artifacts bearing these markings have been found in modern-day Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, and surrounding regions. The widespread presence of these symbols hints at cultural communication between communities and possibly shared traditions or beliefs. Whether these symbols formed a true writing system or a shared symbolic language, their geographic distribution suggests that they were an important part of the region's cultural identity. The ongoing debate among scholars. The academic world remains divided about the true nature of the Vinca symbols. Some archaeologists consider them the earliest writing system in Europe, possibly predating Sumerian script by thousands of years. Others insist they are merely decorative or ritual marks without linguistic meaning. Modern technologies such as digital analysis and pattern recognition have been used to study the symbols in new ways. Researchers examine frequency, structure, and repetition to determine whether the markings follow linguistic rules. So far, the results remain inconclusive. The symbols appear structured enough to be meaningful, yet not complex enough to clearly represent language. Messages from a silent civilization. The Vinca symbols remain one of archaeology's most fascinating mysteries. They may represent the first steps toward writing, a symbolic system lost before it could fully develop, or something entirely different that modern scholars have yet to understand. What is certain is that they come from a civilization that existed thousands of years before recorded European history. These people built thriving communities, developed advanced crafts, and left behind symbols that still challenge modern science. Perhaps one day new discoveries will provide the missing clues needed to decode these ancient marks. Until then, the Vinca symbols remain silent witnesses to a forgotten chapter of human creativity, message from a civilization whose voice we can see but still cannot hear.